Okay guys, if you want to turn to page 20 of your manual now, we're going to have a little closer look at the cardiovascular component of your client's programs. Like I discussed before, as personal trainers we'll deal a lot with their strength and their resistance work, but you really want to encourage them to do all forms of exercise. So it's important that you guys have an understanding of what cardiovascular work your client is capable of doing and what cardiovascular work you can prescribe for them to make sure they're gaining benefits and being safe at the same time. The number one point is, probably the most important point, is just make sure they're safe the whole time. So you really want to avoid any high impact or contact cardiovascular work. This is pretty easy for all you gym trainers because you can get your clients on the bike or the elliptical or the treadmill and everything's going to be pretty safe, there's no risk of falling. Outdoor trainers, it's going to be a little bit tougher for you guys. You've just got to make sure that if you are giving your clients cardiovascular work to do outdoors, you really want to make sure that they're always going to be safe and there's no risk. So I would take out any forms of runs where there's steps because there's a chance of them falling. I'd personally take out all kind of beach runs because their ligaments aren't as strong in their ankles and the uneven surface of the beach are more likely to create your client to fall or sprain an ankle or get injured. So just be aware when you're running your cardiovascular programs, guys, that just you want to avoid risk of your client falling over, tripping up and getting injured. In terms of when you can start your cardiovascular work, we mentioned earlier today that if your client has led a sedentary lifestyle up to 22 weeks of pregnancy, now is not the time to do resistance work, and that same sentiment goes for cardiovascular work. So if you're working and the client walks through the door and she's 22 weeks pregnant and she's never set foot on a bike or a treadmill or elliptical, now is not the time to introduce that, guys. The stress that might put on her system is more riskier than the benefits of making her do it. So this is the time we really should just have to encourage her to walk or kind of just to do whatever she's been doing, and then that will take out any risk for you. And then you can say, once you have the baby, then we can implement some cardiovascular work, then we can get you fitter, and then we can kind of move you in the right direction. But up until that point, it's going to be too risky for you and it's going to be too risky for the mother. The next 2 points, again, we would have mentioned earlier today, but you really want to avoid the high intensity and high interval training. There's no purpose for you to push your client to that limit. You're not looking for those big peaks and troughs of heart rate. You're not looking for them to sweat and lose weight. You're just looking for consistency, guys. So just making sure your client, whatever cardiovascular work you're giving them, it's a nice consistent rate. You give them a warm up, you give them a cool down, and they're not working too hard and there's a risk for their heart just kind of overloading. Again, this next point is similar to the one at the top. You just want to make sure balance and stability is encouraged the whole time. Obviously, throughout each trimester, as your client's posture will change, her center of gravity will change, and it's going to be a new experience for your client. She's not going to get used to that center of gravity shift, so it's a lot easier for you guys to give her kind of stable based environment exercises. That's why bike, fantastic, elliptical, fantastic, treadmills, not fantastic, but it's still a good, nice, safe exercise for your client to use where they're not likely to fall. It doesn't really matter if their center of gravity is shifted, they'll be safe to continue that throughout their whole pregnancy. You really want to avoid prescribing over 15 minutes of consistent cardiovascular work. Even if you've got a really fit client and she really want to work hard, you want to take the risk away from you as the trainer, and you want to just encourage your client just to, if you're going to write a program, just say 15 minutes or 12 to 15 minutes on the bike, have a nice rest, and then put them onto another exercise. But generally, take away the risk from yourself and from your client and just compact the length of the cardiovascular time to 15 minutes at a time. And obviously the last one is promote walking as a form of kind of fitness, but it's more as a kind of well-being as well. Certainly if you've got a first-time mother, chances are she's still kind of working full-time, she's coming home late from the city, and then if she's only coming working and seeing you in the gym, she might not be getting as much kind of outdoor time, much time in nature as she can. It's a great way to kind of get them to relax, get them to unwind. Walking is fantastic, as you know, for heart benefits, health benefits. It's not always a challenge to get them to work as hard as they can. It's nice, obviously, just to kind of get them walking around and moving and feeling happy and healthy for their pregnancy. In terms of flexibility training, obviously there's less things to think about for you guys, and we've mentioned again a lot of them in your manual already, and Ross would have mentioned kind of the role of relaxing in flexibility work. You just want to make sure that, yeah, when you're stretching your client, you're not taking the stretches over 70% because of the risk of injury. You're not bouncing in between any of your stretches with your clients, again, just to avoid that chance of getting injured. Obviously, I've seen this before, and this is a big mistake that kind of some trainers make. They write a fantastic exercise program, and they've made sure the client's not lying on their back the whole time. They've got them on an incline, and they're keeping them moving, and they kind of forget that they can't lie on their back for over 2 minutes after 16 weeks. So it's just important for you guys to remember to take that mentality into your stretch program. So if you are going to partner stretch with them, don't do a fantastic session with them where they're never lying on the back and then forget about it at the end and they lie on the back for 2 minutes, and you've kind of undone all your work that you've done in your program, and you're also putting your client at risk for them stopping their blood going to their uterus and to their baby. Encourage the whole body is stretched, although a lot of the work that I will do with my clients really focuses on kind of glute strength, lower back strength. It's really important as the posture shifts, your clients are more likely to become more and more kyphotic, certainly kind of during the later stages of pregnancy. So it's important to encourage flexibility and range of motion through kind of upper thoracic region, do lots of chest stretching, kind of take away any of those tightnesses and imbalances that you might see occurring. That's why just constantly monitoring how your client's posture is changing. You can help that through stretching and range of motion training. So just be aware of that throughout each trimester. And the last couple, again, common sense. You just want to make sure the client is breathing the whole time. I know I'm a sucker for it. When someone stretches me, it's the hardest thing in the world, and I generally hold my breath because it's more painful than the workout. So just, if your client isn't a fantastic person at being stretched, just make sure that they're breathing, they're relaxed as much as they can, and you're just encouraging them to kind of go into the stretch to make the most out of it. And the final point, which you can't quite see on here, but you'll see it on your slides, is if there is any hip discomfort, which again, it can happen, it's quite common, certainly during the kind of later stages of the second trimester, just always have a plan B stretch. So if one stretch hurts them, give them an alternative just to make sure that body part's stretched. If that hurts them as well, then just move on through your stretch routine. But having 2 stretches for every one body part is a fantastic way to make sure that your client's getting the most kind of stretch as they need to be. This slide here is to reiterate the fact that, yeah, we've mentioned it before, warming up and cooling down obviously is very, very important. But the reason this slide is in here is just to remind you guys that if your client's running late, don't just forget about the warm-up just to fit in the exercises. Pregnancy is not a time to forget the warm-up and the cool-down. You really want to make sure your client leaves you in exactly the same state as they walked in the gym. Okay, so if you've only got a half an hour session with your client and they rock up 10 minutes late from work, don't go, oh, we'll just bomb off the warm-up and we'll go straight into the workout. It's too dangerous, it's too risky. You really need to make sure your client is doing the whole thing in the right process. So you just still warm them up, cool them down, and the only thing that means is they will just get less workout in the middle of the session. In terms of record keeping, guys, obviously the top ones are mandatory, and you guys should all know that you should be keeping your records for up to 7 years just to make sure you're covered for legal reasons and for Fitness Australia. So obviously we won't go into them, but the ones that we recommend, and these are good sales tools again for you guys. Personally, I will take measurements kind of at all the milestones. So you're taking them at the beginning, 12 weeks, 28 weeks, and 38 weeks, just so you can really monitor how your client is progressing, how they're growing, how their posture's changing. Photographs are a fantastic way, not only to really monitor how your client's posture's changed, but it's also a fantastic way postnatally when you can get your client bouncing back to their pre-baby self and they can witness that change. It's fantastic for their state of mind, it's fantastic for your business because then you can show people, wow, I got my client bounced back 6 months postnatally, and she looks as good as she was before she even fell pregnant. So I'd encourage all of you guys to kind of get into the habit of, whilst these ones are mandatory, but it's a really good kind of selling technique and good just to monitor your client's progress all the way through, just to make sure she's kind of growing in the right areas and making sure you can kind of program around those changes. We mentioned this in the 20 points to creating the perfect program. Now, in previous years, there has been contention about how hard you can push your client. We've always used heart rate monitors as a way to monitor the intensity of how hard you can push your client. When I studied at university, it used to be 130 beats per minute. I think around 5 years ago, 140, then it went to 150, and now we're not using heart rate monitors as a gauge of how hard someone is working. The main reason being is everyone's heart rate adapts differently to exercise based on their fitness, their age, what they're doing. So by using another system, we can safely gauge how hard they're working without using their heart rate. So we use Borg's scale of exertion for pregnancy training. And this is Borg's 15-point scale of perceived exertion. Again, I would recommend printing this off and showing it to your client. Whilst it's great to explain it to them, it's a lot easier if they can visualize it and they can see it, so they know exactly what you're expecting from them. You really don't want your client going anywhere over a 14 during her session or at all during pregnancy. At 14, you know your client is, she's working somewhat hard at a steady pace, but she's not overloading or overworking. She should be able to maintain a conversation the whole time throughout your session, and she'd be able to not be able to be working too hard. If you're getting a client up to 18, 19, 20, chances are she's not going to be able to talk, she's not going to be able to breathe, and she's going to be doing detriment to herself and detriment to her baby. So as a scale, guys, always encourage your client to get to 12 to 14 during the session. That's why if they can visualize this, they can see it, they know what to expect, then during the session, how hard you working, they can go, yeah, I'm working at 11 or working at 12. So just explain to them before you even start any of your sessions, guys, explain this scale, and it's a great way to monitor how hard you can push your client.